Hello and welcome to Under Common Taste. This is a podcast where we create and discuss homebrew content for tabletop RPGs.
No, that's a horse of a different color.
I'm Ian Woodworth. I'm joined by my co-host James Daly, and today we are going into part 3 of our discussion on dragons.
Dagrons!
Today we are going to be talking about the third major group of dragons, less prominent than the chromatic and metallic dragons. We're going to be talking about the gem dragons.
Yeah, we use the term major very loosely in this one.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly more gem dragons in the world and in lore than there are, say, deep dragons and shadow dragons and moonstone dragons and, the other ones that kind of fall into one of these categories but aren't one of the major listed ones in one of these categories.
I'm still arguing from the lapidary point of view that moonstone is a semi-precious stone, should therefore count as a gem. But, I mean, if crystal's going to count as a gem, moonstone's got to be there too. But I will table that for now.
I am personally of the opinion that the crystal dragon should have been the diamond dragon.
Yes, absolutely.
Just based off of what you got going on there. Or even just the quartz dragon. Go with an actual specific stone and not just crystal, because crystal is all of them.
I mean, when they say crystal, I presume they mean rock crystal, which was another term for quartz. So I get that one. But diamond would have been much more fitting, especially because you've got emerald, you've got sapphire. I don't think there's a ruby.
Sardior is the ruby dragon.
Yes, exactly. Okay, you're correct. And so those are your 4 precious stones. So there are only 4 precious stones. Everything else is semi-precious or lesser. That's your gemology and your mineral talk for the day. So yeah, absolutely should have been a diamond dragon.
You mean to tell me that you're not going to break out your lapidary knowledge a single more time in this episode?
It might happen. It might happen, but maybe.
Yeah, I expect it to happen again at some point. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the gem dragons today and what really differentiates them from the metallic and chromatic dragons from a world building standpoint, from the established lore, and also sort of what roles they fill in a D&D game. But before we get into that, again, trying to get some just generic dragon topics that we can discuss before we dive into the minutia of the lore dump, I want to talk a little bit about how to use dragons in a game. So
why dragon?
Yeah, why dragon?
Why dragon? All right.
Yeah. What is the reason for using a dragon and not some other monster? Why do you want to include a dragon? And when might a dragon not be an appropriate choice?
Well, when you want to burninate the thatch roofed cottages.
Okay, Trogdor. I guess you would be strong bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or strong mad. I don't know. I might feel strong mad's role.
Yeah.
Since they're carving to the table. But yeah. No, I like this too. And I had a couple of ideas too, because the gem dragons they're quirky. And I love the fact that they're quirky. And I had an idea of how we could work them in we talked about our epic level campaign that we started kind of building up when we talked about the metallic dragons. And I think I have a way we could slowly work these gem dragons in as well. So we can definitely dive these in. But dragons themselves in a story, I mean, these are going to be generally like the big movers of a story, if that makes sense. They are going to be fulcrum points, I would say.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, because they don't necessarily have to be the point of the story, but they are definitely going to be something that has a certain amount of gravity to it. It's going to be something that has a certain amount of significance to it. You should not have incidental dragons.
Yeah, no, I get that. And part of my brain wants to do the whole Nesingwary quest of WoW. And maybe you're sitting there trying to catch whelps or whatever, and this leads to you coming across, an adult dragon or a great worm at some point. But even that should be fairly significant. Dragons, given their size, given their power, they're going to be like an apex predator. And so there's not going to be a lot of them in any ecology, but a small handful, because what's going to compete with them? And they're going to compete with each other, and they're all going to have their little niche. And so, yeah, they are going to be few and far between. Dragons should be rare.
Right. And that kind of runs a little bit counter to, the ethos of Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, they are the eponymous monster of Dungeons and Dragons. We're not playing Tunnels and Trolls.
Right.
We're playing Dungeons and Dragons. There's an expectation that there is going to be a dragon at some point.
But that's it. There's an expectation there's going to be a dragon. And generally, the dragon is going to be the big bad you're going to see to culminate the entire story or the campaign, especially going back to older D&D. You went through this whole dungeon where, you waded through a lot of goblins and kobolds and trolls and orcs and ogres. And at the end, there was a dragon.
Yeah. And there is something about fighting a dragon that just has a different energy to it. And it's not just because they are a more powerful enemy. I mean, there are certainly enemies that are more powerful than the dragons that are listed in the books. We had a whole March Madness bracket that was only 1/3 of the bracket was dragons.
Yeah, there were a lot of heavy hitters.
There were a lot of heavy hitters. Of course, it ended up being 2 dragons in the finals.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, I think 3 of the final 4 were dragons.
Yeah.
But there is a certain gravity to including a dragon in your game. And, there's a certain expectation surrounding the encounter with a dragon. You're going to expect the dragon to fly at some point. You're going to expect the dragon to use its breath weapon at some point. And you're going to expect there to be some sort of exceptional loot after you have defeated the dragon, if you're able to defeat it.
Absolutely. The other thing, too, is when you're dealing with a dragon on the map, just the size of the dragon, especially if you're using miniatures, you get that feeling of your characters being dwarfed by this massive physical presence. And then when you look at the dragon's stats, its strength is near peak, its intelligence is near peak, but it's not only this martial physical thing, it has access to all forms of magics that your party might barely be brushing the sides against. So, I mean, this is an old, ancient piece of earth, basically, that is the peak of everything. It's not just a brute. It's not just a cunning trickster. It's not just a mage. It's all of those together in one concentrated force that you're trying to defeat or outwit.
Right. The point that I would really like to drive home with all of this is that whenever you use a dragon in your game, it should be more than just a flying sack of hit points.
Yeah.
Because dragons are mobile, dragons are intelligent, they should use tactics, they should use the terrain, they should use elevation to their advantage whenever possible. They should have the intelligence to prioritize targets.
Absolutely.
And there may be instances where the players are going to cry foul, but this is your opportunity as a dungeon master to go all out. Because it is the monster that you can reliably say, this is how they would act.
Yes.
This is what they would do. They would be smart about it. They would be cunning. They would be ruthless.
Absolutely. And if you're going to have, a long campaign with a dragon BBEG, having that dragon come and torment or toy with the party, especially depending on the type. If you have, some of these more chromatic dragons that very much are going to enjoy playing cat and mouse. You look at something like Curse of Strahd, where Strahd just kind of like randomly appears through the village and encounters the party at different points and always just out of their reach, always able to give a little twist of a blade and then out, or you're always able to change the environment and then vanish. A dragon would very much be able to do this to your party as well. And so, having the dragon take different forms, having the dragon be there, just having the presence of the dragon. And so, like I said, a lot of these dragons have layer effects, or they change the environment around them just by being there. And having your party notice this, but not actually encountering the dragon, but just the shadow of the dragon or the threat of the dragon is a great way to build tension.
Absolutely, yeah. And now, from a narrative perspective, why should you use a dragon? And what does using a dragon really mean from a narrative perspective? Well, for one, it means that there is a powerful entity with tremendous resources that cannot be overcome simply by raw brute force.
Fair.
That is the crux of what it means to have a dragon in your game. It means that there is a strategically relevant entity that cannot simply be brute forced through, that you have to take some time to think about, that you have to take some time to strategize in order to overcome it.
Yeah, even still, I think as a player, I know this is generally an exciting part of the game for me personally, but I think other players enjoy this too. But you know that dragon's up on that hill, and now you have to prepare for it. And so what are you going to do? You got to learn about the dragon. You've got to learn about its lair. You've got to learn about, what kind of guards or thralls it's going to have around it. And then now you're going to have to prepare yourself. Is it going to be potions? Is it going to be spells? Is it going to be magical armor? Is there a relic somewhere that you can find that can diffuse some of this dragon's magic or nullify some of its abilities? And going and finding these things to further prepare yourself to fight this thing that in most cases is near the level of a deity in a lot of cases.
It is going to be the closest thing to a god that most mortals in your world will have encountered.
Yes. And you're going to go up and you're going to boop it in the snoot. Yeah, let's do it. But if you just rush into it, you're totally getting ruffle stomped.
Yeah. And, talking about, the recon element of it, if they have minions that surround their lair, what is the best way to get through with fighting the fewest number of minions possible so that we retain as many of our resources as possible for fighting the actual dragon?
Exactly.
That is another very big thing that you don't really see a whole lot of. So often, whenever I see dragons show up in actual plays or in modules, they are layering by themselves.
Yeah.
And they don't have those sort of minions or guardians or even really a whole lot in the line of security measures like traps in their lair. It's just that they're, for some reason, hoping that the remoteness of their lair is sufficient security to keep the adventurers out.
And there are one or two dragon types that would be their personality and that would be correct. But many others, absolutely not. For many others, that line of servants or thralls is their first line of defense, because if you've used all your spell slots and hit points by the time you've walked up to their cave, so much easier for them.
Right. It doesn't matter if you have access to 7th level spells. If by the time you reach the dragon, you're at 3/4 health and you don't have a spell slot above 3rd level left.
I've got cantrips.
Yeah, it's hard to fight an adult dragon with cantrips.
Fair, very fair.
So yeah, those are the sorts of things that I really wanted to talk about, that I really wanted to discuss.
2, the dragon doesn't always have to be something you fight.
Absolutely, yeah.
There are ways that maybe you can bring the dragon something at once, and there are non-combative roleplay ways that you could dissuade a draconic threat. Also, the party could have a draconic sponsor, perhaps. And again, dragons taking their polymorph, taking their, alternate forms that they're allowed to. The party could be backed by a dragon without their knowledge for most or all of the campaign. Maybe they know they're buying in with a dragon at the very start. And the dragon dragons are going to be shapers of empires. If a nation needs to rise up or a nation needs to be torn down, or the very landscape of your world needs to be changed, a dragon might be at the heart of it, because that's the kind of stuff they're going to be doing.
Absolutely, yeah. And these are still intelligent creatures that have their own preferences. They don't necessarily have to follow all of the various details laid out in the stat block in the book.
Right.
I mean, I think we have driven that point home across now 3 episodes, that just because the block text in the book says that they are a lawful evil creature does not mean you have to make them a lawful evil creature. Just because it says that they like to eat elves and nymphs doesn't mean that that has to be their preferred food. They
Right.
don't have to be going through and gobbling up elven villages in order to make an impact on your game world.
Right. Now, again, with this, we are focusing a little heavily on D&D because that is, the basis of a lot of dragon lore. But if you do want to bring a dragon into something like Kids on Bikes, Powered by the Apocalypse, even Old Gods of Appalachia or something like that, again, just the presence of a dragon or dragon lore in the area, the dragon doesn't even have to be present for it to shape the game. I mean, it is exciting when the dragon absolutely shows up, sure. But going back to old second and third editions, things like the draconic aura of fear, and just if a dragon was within a few miles of vicinity, everybody starts getting anxious and starts acting afraid and getting agitated just because a dragon's nearish by. And so, again, your party may never meet the dragon, but if they enter a town where this dragon is, and everyone's just acting weird and they don't know why. And again, it could just be an off-screen dragon for whatever reason that has encroached in the area, or its lair has kind of expanded in this area, or the town's moved here. But just the remote presence even can shape how your NPCs act.
And I mean, if you're going on that route where the mere presence of a dragon is going to alter the psychology of the people in the area, dragon cults exist.
Absolutely.
There are bound to be individuals who will actually seek out a dragon's territory and settle within that territory because they want to be in the proximity of that dragon.
Yeah. I mean, people are drawn to power. That makes
Absolutely.
absolute sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And that particular comment goes back to a gripe that I have had for a while that I've also heard the guys over at the Goblins Corner comment on before, is that we are disappointed that there is not an ancient dragon warlock patron in official D&D.
There should be.
There absolutely should be.
Absolutely. Honestly, Tiamat would be right up there. Tiamat, Takias, both of them right there. Another thing, and again, if you want to do a cyberpunk, this would be harder to do with like your standard chromatic or metallic dragons, but taking that concept, that idea of one of those dragons and making it a cyber thing, a cyber program, a virus, a purely AI entity. So you have this AI dragon within whatever your cyberspace is that affects prosthetics or cybernetics or things like that. And it could change whole realms of your netscape within a cyberpunk. I think that would be an amazing story. I'm thinking something like the old book Neuromancer, where the AI shaped and like worked all kinds of backdoors for the people working with it. I could see someone taking that concept and making Wintermute was the name of the AI on that. Making Wintermute a dragon would fit perfectly with the cyberpunk type game.
Right. And I mean, if you're wanting to have a cyberpunk feel game that has dragons in it, you play Shadowrun.
Yeah, fair.
Because I'm pretty sure that Shadowrun has dragons in it, and that they are to use I think this is the terminology from the Fate system, as a plot level creature.
Okay.
A plot level entity, which means that you don't give them stats. You cannot fight them and win.
Okay.
They exist as an entity within the plot. And if you want to defeat them or circumvent them, you have to do it through the plot. You cannot do it through direct confrontation.
Nice. Plot armor is always a wonderful thing.
Yeah, because the Dresden Files RPG runs off the Fate system, and I'm pretty sure that that's where I first heard it, was in a Dresden Files RPG actual play.
Oh, that'd be fun to watch. I need to find one of those.
It was a season 2 of Thursday Nights. Whenever they finished up their 4th edition campaign, they did a season of Dresden Files, and it was great.
Okay, I'll have to find that one.
Anyway, we've been going for about 20 minutes on this, so we should probably get into talk about the actual dragons that we came here to talk about tonight. I mean, this is a good conversation to have, because there are a lot of points here that you can take bits and pieces of to really expand how your dragons feel in the world, how they make the world feel lived in, how the world will shape around an entity that has this much influence.
Yeah, and I like how you phrase that, because they don't shape the world shapes itself around the dragon, and I think that's fairly accurate.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to talking about gem dragons. There are 5 types of gem dragons that we're going to be talking about today. the amethyst, crystal, emerald, sapphire, and topaz. There are a few generalities that all of these gem dragons fall into. The first is they are all inherently psionic.
Yes.
They all have psionics. They all have the ability to communicate telepathically, and then they all have additional psionic abilities beyond that start getting a little more specific as you go into the actual dragon types. They also have spells and spell-like abilities that fall more into line with those. They also have breath weapons that do not fit into the standard elemental damage types.
Yeah, I really love the Gem Dragon breath weapons. I think they are so much more interesting.
They are. They really are. And, talking about 5th edition breath weapons, they're still interesting. They're nowhere near as far out as some of the older editions had them, but they are still good in 5th edition.
Yeah, absolutely. I do like with the Gem Dragons too, and again, we've largely hand-waved alignment, but I like that the Gem Dragons by and large are, as written, expected to be neutral, which is great, and they tend to be more quirky, more isolated than the other dragons as well. They are more going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? More hermitage, but more like a hermit.
Insular?
They're going to be far more insular than most other dragons. Some actively dislike being around other things, and some are just like, meh, I'm doing my own thing. I might interact if I feel like it today. They almost have agoraphobia, maybe a touch of autism.
Potentially. So I'm going to bring up Jim Butcher here.
Okay.
This is not a Dresden Files reference with Jim Butcher, but if you have your bingo card, we're talking about Jim Butcher, so you can check that off for this episode. So I've been recently reading, I can't remember the name of the series now, but it's The Aeronauts Windlass, and I'm on book 2, which is The Olympian Affair.
Okay.
It's sort of a crystal punk with airships and all of that. It's really well done.
Okay, I need to retry Aeronauts Windlass.
Yeah, it takes a little bit to get into it.
Okay.
Once you get about 2 or 3 chapters in, the plot starts cooking.
Gotcha.
And then you really get into it.
I think the series, is it the Cinderspire series?
Yes, the Cinderspire.
Excellent.
But there are individuals within that called etherealists, who are essentially the magicians within this crystal punk fantasy setting. They're able to manipulate this energy called the Ethereum. And one of the side effects of their manipulating the Ethereum is they all pick up what are referred to as quirks. So they all pick up these little, you might call them like schizophrenic tics sometimes. It all depends on what it is. So like one of the individuals, he has a collection of stuff. And so he has to have all of his things accounted for. And there is a point in one of the books where he is taken out of commission because he ends up having to surrender his collection, and it just turns him into a complete basket case.
Okay, this sounds exactly like a Sapphire Dragon. We'll hold off for that.
Yeah.
It's the Sapphire.
But like one of the other prominent characters, her name is Folly, and she is incapable of speaking directly to people. But she has like this little jar of crystals that she talks to the crystal, knowing that the other people around are going to overhear. And like she speaks to them as if she is telling the crystals to relay the message to the person that is having the conversation with her. That's her quirk.
I could totally gel with a lot of these people.
And like one that's a prominent villain in this series, she's very much a stickler for manners and polite etiquette. And if you run afoul of the rules of proper etiquette, she snaps.
Okay.
And so those are the sorts of things that we're going to talk about this a little more as we go through the different dragons. But these are the sort of quirks that I think that the gem dragons would have.
Absolutely. Yeah. This sounds actually like a lot of them already.
And with them being psionic, that would be the tie-in that I would use to sort of merge this storyline. It just so happened that I am reading this book at an opportune time to make this connection.
Perfect. I love it.
But yeah, that's the sort of vibe that I was getting off of this.
Gotcha.
So the one other thing that I really wanted to point out is that the gem dragons don't always live on the material plane. In fact, most of them prefer to dwell in various inner planes. So those are your elemental planes. So that's the, air, fire, earth, and water. That's the para-elemental planes of steam, ash, ooze, and ice. And then also in older editions, the quasi-elemental planes, which there's 8 of those, and I don't remember all of them.
It's been a little while.
It's going towards positive and towards negative energy from the 4 elemental planes. But they actually prefer dwelling in these elemental planes to the material plane most of the time. And you will see, especially in older editions, whenever they're talking about the layers of these dragons, quite often they are layering at transition points between the material plane and the elemental plane. So that could be a plot point for you as a DM. Incorporating a gem dragon into your game is like, say, okay, we need to get to the elemental plane of Earth.
But
we need to find an amethyst dragon because they're going to have a lair that is going to straddle the line between the material plane and the plane of Earth, and then convince the amethyst dragon to let us go through their lair into the elemental plane of Earth.
Yeah, there would very likely be a portal or a gateway in or near a dragon's lair like that. Absolutely.
I mean, this could just be one of those, like a thinning. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a proper portal. We saw this a lot when we were talking about the Shadowfell, where you could go down a dark alleyway at night and just happen to cross into the Shadowfell without knowing it.
Yeah, you just kind of slip through.
You just kind of slip through. I think that these dragons would have layers in places where they could do that.
Yeah,
I think that they would prefer those places because it would allow them access to both the material plane and the elemental plane of their choice with relative ease.
Yeah, I would see that. And two, thinking of the dragon like an intelligent creature. While it can, do things like plane shift, it can use magical abilities. It's not going to waste those resources if it does not have to. It's just going to step through because it might need to use those resources in a pinch, or using those resources are going to exert some form of effort that I'd rather not. And so I'll step through this portal or this veil versus blowing a spell slot.
Right. And on top of that, the denizens of one plane are going to be at a substantial disadvantage if they have to go into the other plane.
Yes.
So, if a group of adventurers come into this Amethyst Dragon's lair, this Amethyst Dragon can just fall back into the elemental plane of Earth, where everything is suddenly chaotically shifting, and this dragon has a burrow speed. It's just going to burrow around, and it's going to start picking off the adventuring party because it's now in its element. And then conversely, you end up having the denizens of the elemental plane of Earth that are used to this sort of fluctuating, ephemeral, malleable plane. It can just back out into the material plane where everything is now concrete and solid.
Yeah.
And so it's able to manipulate either way to ensure it has the upper hand.
No, I love that idea too, especially like if the party is hostile towards the dragon, and the dragon seeks to bait them through this veil into another plane, where absolutely, that would be that's a cunning, intelligent, and extremely effective defensive tactic, is if they lure the party or some group of NPCs into this plane where it has a very firm advantage. Even luring this party into a plane and then using its own ability to plane shift out and trapping the party in that plane. And maybe that's part of the story hook. Maybe that's a bridge between, a level 10 campaign and a level 15 campaign. Your party's pursuing this dragon, you're following it, it's retreating, you go after it, you step into another plane, it bounces out, and now your party has to figure out how to get home.
Absolutely, yeah. You're chasing an emerald dragon and you go through its volcano lair into the plane of fire, and then you get stuck there and you have to figure out, how do I get to the city of brass so I can find a portal to take me home?
Yeah. And honestly, if you're starting at a high level, if you're starting a level 10, 15 plus campaign, that's a good way to start your party. Start them off attacking a dragon right at the outset. and then leave them in a planescape, and now they've got to do a planeswalk. That would be fun. I would play that game.
And then one last little detail before we get into the Gem Dragons proper. According to lore, and this is from Dragon Magazine number 37, which is where Sardior is first introduced into D&D canon, there were originally 6 Gem Dragon types. The 6th one were Obsidian Dragons.
Okay.
And there's not a whole lot written about them. Like, I was not able to find any real concrete information outside of the information that was presented in that write-up. And even that was minimal. So in 2nd edition, Sardior the Ruby Dragon had the Ruby Palace, which was where they resided. Just like Bahamut has the Platinum Palace on Mount Celestia. And within this palace, Sardior had 6 Thanes, which were the 6 most powerful dragons, one of each type.
Okay.
And at some point, for some undisclosed reason, Sardior killed Cerides, who was his Thane of the Obsidian Dragons. And the rest of the Obsidian Dragons were expelled from his presence, and from that point on, there was violent animosity between the Obsidian Dragons and the rest of the Gem Dragons. And in the books, in what little bit of information I was able to find, the Obsidian Dragons are all listed as being neutral evil.
Interesting.
And the in-world debate that scholars have is whether Sardior killed Cerides because she was evil and because the Obsidian Dragons were evil, or if the Obsidian Dragons became evil because Sardior killed Cerides.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
Cerides.
So, I mean, you have great lore. How do you not build up on lore like that? How do you just, well, we're going to forget about those. Seriously.
So yeah, that is the 6th Gem Dragon that is literally all the information I was able to find on him.
Okay.
There is a stat block for Cerides. I didn't go into it in a whole lot of detail because it is 2nd edition D&D stat block with all of the word salad that entails.
That's very fair. I like the idea of 2nd edition. It was definitely clunky.
So
but
now,
I guess Ceridex is the Starscream of dragons.
yeah, I guess. Yeah. And there's a thing that says that Sardior has the power to bring her back at any time, and just hasn't for whatever reason. And Sardior has not clarified what his reasoning was. Because,
so we also learned that dragons hold the grudges.
Well, he's also a dragon god, so he is not beholden to any mortal that's going to ask him to clarify, to validate his reasoning.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, let's actually get into talking about these dragons for a minute.
Let's do it.
So, yeah, we're starting off with the Amethyst dragons. Amethyst dragons are considered inherently diplomatic. They are able to communicate easily with all other races. Most of them end up having an innate ability to just communicate with all intelligent creatures. In old editions, they started off with like a 20% chance as a hatchling of being able to communicate immediately with any other intelligent creature, and that percent chance increased by 5% each time they increased an age category. So by the time they hit Great Worm, which I think is like 12 age categories later, so they would have an 80% chance of being able to communicate with everybody.
Okay.
They prefer communication over conflict. They see this whole good versus evil, law versus chaos thing as just complete horseshit.
Again, that holds that neutral alignment too, so I like it.
Yeah, they are decidedly the most neutral of these dragons. They are by far the most level-headed of these dragons, and they will almost always try to talk out a conflict rather than fight out a conflict.
Yeah. That said, going by Fizbin's, as communicative, as amiable as these dragons are, they still prefer their isolation. They tend to like things that deal with lost cultures, lost artifacts. So this would have very much like an archaeologist feel. These would be, like I said, an archaeologist, a museum curator, maybe like a professor or an old wise person.
Yeah, I
If
don't think they're going to be a curator, because being a
yeah,
curator means you have to be in a place where people are.
yeah, very fair.
They are absolutely the person running the dig out in the field.
Yeah, they're running the person out in the field, or they are the silent, mysterious donor that suddenly this museum has a ton of money to get these items, and it just happens to be right next to her in their lair.
Yeah,
Um,
these are the Laura Croft dragons.
yeah, absolutely. That is the
They're
perfect
not
analogy.
Indiana Jones dragons, because Indiana Jones is a professor.
Right.
These are the Laura Croft Tomb Raider
Yes.
dragons.
Perfect.
So, as I mentioned earlier, they have a natural burrow speed, and they like living in mountainous areas as well as living in the elemental plane of Earth.
Understandable.
So, all of the gem dragons have a resistance to 2 damage types. Amethyst Dragon has, I think, the best combination. They are resistant to Force and Psychic,
Oh, nice. Yeah.
which part of that is the fact that they have a force damage breath weapon,
Yes.
and part of it is their psionics, I think, because
Yeah.
they are among the most powerful psionically of
Yeah.
the gem dragons. And I think at some point we're going to have to go through and talk about second edition psionics and try and see if we can't figure out how to make heads or tails of anything, because there are some cool things listed in these dragon entries in the second edition monster manual for this kind of psionic stuff that they can do.
Absolutely. One really neat thing I love, absolutely love about the Gem Dragons is their breath weapons. Their breath weapons don't normally do elemental damage, but they will do some type of damage, but they also give status effects, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, so the Amethyst Dragon, like I said, they have a force breath weapon. They have one that's just a line. I think it's either a line or a cone in 5th edition, but originally it was just a line.
It's a shining bead of gravitational force in its mouth. So it's a 30-foot cone, and then you must make a DC 17 strength saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes 8d8 force damage, and its speed becomes 0 until the dragon's next turn. So it creates a little gravity well.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Just
does.
kind of badass.
Yeah, so they have gravitational breath weapon,
Yeah.
is basically what it is. And then the second one that they have in 5th edition is the one that lines up with what the second edition breath weapon is. So they basically shoot out this purple faceted lozenge. So if you're not sure what a lozenge is in this context, it's a D8.
Yeah.
It's that 2 four-sided pyramids with the bases smacked together. That's the shape you're looking at. And they're able to spit this out to a certain distance, and whenever it lands, it detonates. And it has a knockback effect on anything that gets hit by it.
I would love seeing these two used together like a black hole. So you spit out that gravity well. And for this, I mean, I would homebrew that it draws people into that point, and then the second one blasts people away. I
Yeah,
think that would make an amazing 1-2 combo.
Yeah, they do the first one to suck everyone into one location so that whenever they drop the second one, they hit everybody. And that makes sense too, because they do have an aversion to collateral damage.
Yes.
That is one of their big character traits, is that they will fight in such a way as to minimize incidental casualties and minimize collateral damage.
So they are Goku.
I suppose, yeah. But
I know very little Dragon Ball Z lore, but I do know that.
And apparently, originally, they also had basically a sonic shriek that functioned like a banshee's wail.
Ooh.
Which meant, because it was from an older edition, it was a save or die.
Nice.
Yeah, basically, it would, if you failed, it turns your brain to goo and it runs out your ears.
I like it.
Yeah, you melt like the Nazis at the end of Last Crusade.
Was it? Yeah, Last Crusade. Yeah. Oh, is it Last Crusade
No, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Lost Ark? Yeah, Lost Ark.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah, Last Crusade was the Holy Grail.
Holy Grail. Yeah.
It's been a hot minute since I've seen those. I need to watch them again.
Yeah, though I didn't like Temple of Doom.
No, Temple of Doom is by far the weakest of the 3.
Yes.
And there are only 3.
Only 3. They should have made some more, but they never did.
I know, right? And now Harrison Ford is just too old to do it.
Fair.
So yeah, one of the cool things about the Amethyst Dragons is that in older editions, they were actually immune to force damage. And once they get to the Great Worm level, they become immune to force damage. But in older editions, they were just flat out immune to force.
I like it.
And so whenever you have a dragon that can drop Beads of Force or Wall of Force or Resilient Sphere or any of the Big B's hand sort of spells, they can drop a Wall of Force and then they can walk through their own Wall of Force.
Oh, that's vile. That's so wrong.
Yeah. So, like we mentioned, Amethyst Dragons like to live in rocky areas. They primarily like living on what are called tarns, which are lakes and ponds that are up on top of a mountain.
Okay.
They really like that because they do have an inherent water breathing. So they like to have a lair entrance that is in and around one of these tarns. And so that is sort of where they're at.
Gotcha.
So yeah, next up are the Crystal Dragons.
So the Crystal Dragons are absolutely going to be your most social of the Crystal Dragons. And I would
Far and
argue
beyond.
probably the most social of your dragons, period.
Silver comes close.
Yeah, it would be between those two. And
I think Silver might take the cake because they do actually like to live in cities with people.
fair. Yeah, okay. I will grant you that because, again, the Crystals still have that bit of aloof, but they totally want you to see all their shiny stuff. Like, they want to show it all off. They would absolutely be an influencer.
Yeah, the word that comes up to describe them all the time is curious. They are inherently curious. They are inherently inquisitive. They want to know more.
Yeah, and I was getting more the feel of pretentious. Like, if you were going to look at like MTV Cribs or like the old 80s show Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, they totally would be at a Crystal Dragon's place because they're treasure they want to curate, and they actually, it says they value beauty over base value. So they want the best, the most well crafted. And again, they want people to see it. They want to show it off. And so they're going to go, they'd be going to galas and parties and glamming up and just like totally decked out, totally dressed up, just so they could show off all of the awesome stuff they've collected.
Absolutely, yeah. They also tend to be sort of pranksters, almost. Okay. One of the things that is actually listed is that they like to ambush passing adventurers with snowballs.
Okay, that's fun. That's kind of funny.
I mean, you imagine you're trudging through the snow, it's cold, you're miserable, and then all of a sudden, just this psionic powered snowball just comes and beams you in the back of the head.
That's hilarious. But what I'm thinking is, too, you have a great worm. Okay, you have the size of a great worm. While they do like glamming up, again, Crystal Dragons tend to still be a little aloof. And so for them, a small snowball is probably going to be like 3 or 4 feet across. So you get like pelted with a snowman. So woof, woof.
Yeah, I'm picturing now this dragon that the initial snowball or two come in and the party is taking this defensive position, looking around, trying to figure out where they came from, preparing to fight. And this dragon just lifts their head up over this snowbank. And they have, because they're psionic, they have this halo of like 40 snowballs just slowly rotating around their head.
Like a little Gatling gun.
And they full on like Melf's minute meteors bombard the party with snowballs.
I love it. I would totally play a kid's campaign with a playful Crystal Dragon. It would be so much fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Crystal Dragon is perfect for that.
Yeah, that would be great. And again, too, because they're crystal, from the time they hatch, they have like this inner, almost a starlight glow because it's supposed to be like the refractive, the light bouncing through rock crystal or quartz. So, I mean, they'd have this kind of glow to them as well. I'm kind of getting some Buddy the Elf feel from these Crystal Dragons.
I can absolutely see that.
Giant thing of pop with a bunch of syrup.
Yeah. So Crystal Dragons prefer to live in the same biomes as silver and white dragons.
Yeah.
And they tend to have running rivalries specifically with white dragons.
I can see that.
Part of it is because in certain parts of the D&D worlds, white dragons will partner up with frost giants to try and capture crystal dragons.
Okay.
For various different reasons. And also because In lore, crystal dragons will raid a white dragon's clutch, steal their eggs, and raise their children instead of the white dragon.
Nice.
Specifically, according to what I was reading, specifically to raise good aligned white dragons.
Oh, I like it. So when you first mentioned this, what I was thinking of, there was the old video of like the juvenile orangutan, and it's bouncing around, and like there's two tigers. They're not fully grown. They're also juvenile. They're probably, 7, 8 months old, and it's going through, and it's just like pulling their tails and bouncing up because they're tigers. They're dangerous, but he can get away, and it's fun just kind of tormenting the big scary thing. And I could totally see a crystal dragon like tweaking the tail of a white dragon because the white dragon's an asshole and because it can, just for fun.
So getting into sort of the breath weapon and stuff, crystal dragons have a radiant breath weapon.
Understandable.
That can blind you.
Also understandable. Snow Blameless sucks.
Yes, absolutely. And their resistances are to radiant and to cold. The Great Worm gains immunity to radiant damage, which is why the Crystal Great Worm was the winner of the of the March Madness bracket against the aspect of Bahamut.
Yeah.
Because he just turned off Bahamut's breath weapon.
Yeah, just like, nope, I ain't feeling it. That and the blink, that mobility factor is huge.
Absolutely, yes.
The other really fun thing with the Crystal's breath weapon from Fizbin is so whatever creature takes that radiant damage, the Crystal Dragon can gain 25 temporary hit points from that back. So again, they do that radiant damage, and if they take any radiant damage, instead of taking it, they get hit points back. So it does a slight heal, which I think is kind of awesome.
Yeah. And according to the older versions, they're immune to light-based attacks, so radiant damage, and normal cold, and they're able to cast Charm Person at will.
Understandable. Again, they're snoozing around, so it makes sense that they could charm a person.
Yeah.
Ooh, look, something shiny.
Yep. They prefer to lair, like I said, in the same places that silver dragons do, so on the top of high mountain peaks or within the plane of elemental air. They like being in a place where they have a huge panorama view of their surroundings so that they can observe everything and not have people sneak up on them.
And they enjoy the natural beauty of their environs.
Yes. And they are known to do snow and ice sculptures. Their lair is going to have a whole bunch of intricate ice sculptures within it, to the point where they are known to construct entire palaces or fortresses out of snow and ice.
Oh, I love it.
Just because they want to.
No, that kind of gives like the whole like Edward Scissorhands feels where he's sitting there clipping and it's snowing because he's shaving ice.
Except that they're probably using psionics for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Next one are the Emerald Dragons.
Yay! I do like the shiny emeralds. The emeralds are kind of, they're not pretentious, but they're not going to give you a straight answer. They've got the like wise man on the mountain feel. Like they can answer your question, but they're not going to. They're just going to answer a question with a question.
The word that is constantly used to describe them is paranoid.
Fair.
They are inherently mistrustful of everyone.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
And so it takes a whole lot of effort to get close enough to an emerald dragon to even be able to ask it a question.
Yeah.
Let alone to get it to answer that question.
Yeah, the emerald dragon wants little to nothing to do with you 90% of the time.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got that particular shiny thing they want, they might come down and talk to you. You might be able to seek them out, but largely they're going to bamf out before you get close.
Yeah, and with my parallel to the Etherealist from the Cinder Spires, emerald dragons are most like the Etherealists.
Okay. Yeah.
They're hyper intelligent. They have all of these psionic abilities, and they trust nothing and no one.
Fair. Yeah.
And, they're going to have their various quirks surrounding, what you have to do in order to gain an audience.
Yeah. That said, their preferred treasure are things with a story, things with history. They want, again, kind of like the Amethyst Dragon, they want things of cultural importance, of lost history, but they want that paper trail behind it. They want provenance. They want to say, well, it belonged to this person, and this person had it, and this person had it, and then this person had it, and they'd want to be able to follow that whole thing. So, like, they would be more interested in, say, something like a Ming vase, where you could see where it went from one emperor to another emperor to another emperor to an auction house to, some rich family to whoever has it today, versus something like the Holy Grail, where here's this thing and it disappeared and now it's back again. Well, how do I know that's not a fake? Because with the other one, they can track exactly where it went, who exactly had it, so they can be assured it is what they think and believe it is.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing, too, is they tend to prefer coinage. And again, because generally it's going to have that stamp of a historical figure or some historical event. And they can say, well, this coin was from here at this mint at this time with these people. It has these marks. And so these are totally like your coin and card traders at the convention.
Yes, absolutely. So emerald dragons, they like living in volcanoes. Dormant or active, they don't care. That's where they prefer to lair up. And by extension, they like to go into the plane of fire.
Understandable.
But like bronze dragons, they also like to go and search out shipwrecks and plunder that for various treasures.
Yeah, these would absolutely be in the Caribbean, like finding those old like treasure galleon ships.
Oh,
because
yes.
again, you could find those coins and you could tie it to a specific period, to a specific ruler, and be like, this was from here, here. The ship sank, and I found it exactly there.
Yeah, and I would not put it past an emerald dragon to sink a ship
Yes.
and then come back to it 50 years later.
Oh, look what I found.
Exactly.
50 years, probably like 100 years later. Like, oh, look what I found.
Well, it would need to be something that would happen within a set amount of time to where people still remembered it.
Fair. I could see them dragging it up as something, because if they could prove where the ship, they had that, again, if they could prove that chain of custody and be like, no, this ship was lost for 200 years and I found it. Look what I've got. They totally would pull that off.
I also wouldn't put it past them to sink the ship, move the shipwreck.
Oh, yes.
So that it went down someplace where the ship wasn't supposed to be.
Okay.
To make it harder for other people to find it.
This is where the Bermuda Triangle comes from.
Absolutely, yeah. There's just an emerald dragon living on Bermuda.
Absolutely. The other thing I can see is some American or North American history. You had a lot of trade vessels in the Great Lakes, and a lot of them were carrying like wood furniture or raw wood to make furniture, and they sank at like the bottom of Lake Superior, Lake Michigan. And it's so deep and so cold that there's very little oxygen or very little aerobic bacteria down there. So on occasion, they can find these shipwrecks and they bring this wood up, and the wood and furniture is in strangely pristine condition for being at the bottom of a salt lake for so long. And this would probably be something that an emerald dragon would have as well.
Aren't the Great Lakes freshwater?
No, they're saltwater.
I don't think so.
Are you sure? I thought they were salt.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. I stand corrected then.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Talking about breath weapons and such, emerald dragons have a sonic breath weapon, or in 5th edition would be a thunder damage breath weapon, I think. Do they still have that? No, they have psychic now.
Yeah, psychic.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering, because I hadn't had a chance to double check in Fizbin's, because originally it was sonic, so it would have been thunder damage.
Yeah.
But emeralds and sapphires both had that sonic damage. Yeah. And so I was wondering if they would have changed one of them.
Yeah,
and apparently they did.
Yeah. And you were correct. Great Lakes are freshwater, so I stand corrected.
Yeah, because so many cities on the Great Lakes use them as a reservoir.
Oh, okay. Well, that would make sense.
It's like the city of Chicago gets all of its water from Lake Michigan.
Okay, fair.
So emerald dragons have resistance to fire and to psychic, which makes sense.
Again, living in a volcano, and yeah.
And of the two that had that sonic breath weapon, having the emeralds become psychic makes the most sense because their breath weapon disoriented the target. It was a disorientation sort of effect.
So, yeah, the current effect now is it's almost like a beefy version of Bane. So an adult, it's a D6, and the Great Worm, it's a D8. But if you get hit with this breath weapon, you got to roll that D6 or D8, and you take that off of any attack or ability check rolls you make after that until the dragon's next turn. Which, I mean, casting Bane as a breath weapon is pretty awesome.
Yeah, so in 2nd edition, because, of course, it's going to be more brutal in second edition. The duration was 3 rounds per age level of the dragon,
Oh,
plus
damn.
1d4 rounds.
Oh, crap.
And they have to make the saving throw against the breath weapon or be stunned for that long.
Yeah, that's just GG.
And the ones that save are deafened and disoriented for that same amount of time and take a -1 on attack rolls.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's absolutely GG.
Yeah. Second edition wasn't messing around.
No, second edition killed everybody. Everybody died. One neat layer effect that I like, I would love to see it, again, from a geology standpoint, kind of meh on this one. But one of the layer effects for the Emerald Dragon is that within miles of their lair, the stones, you start getting outcroppings of emerald gems coming out, which I would love to see. I would just be like, hey, look at all this. It'd be amazing. Emeralds are one of my favorite gems just for the color. I love the color of them. So that would absolutely be something definitely to see.
So with regards to their layering and stuff and their interaction with other dragons, they are straight up afeared of red dragons. They do not trust red dragons at all.
Okay.
They will actively avoid conflict with a red dragon. They actively hunt fire giants.
Okay.
In fact, giant flesh is one of their favorite things to eat.
Ooh, that would be really good. Where we talked about the other week, where we were trying to build up that idea for like a battle between gods and dragons, and having the gods draft in the titans and the giants.
Yeah.
Having the dragons kind of pull in some of these gym dragons, maybe have them burrow out from the earth. Like, people forgot about the gym dragons, and so the gym dragons show up to help Chromatic and Metallic. And so having an emerald dragon hunting down fire giants would be quite exciting.
Yeah. There was I can't remember what it was now. I didn't write it down. But there was an event that happened, I believe, in second edition canon, where basically it was the dragons effectively got like the rage virus. And so there was a whole slew of dragon attacks and such. And during this time, the gem dragons just noped out of the material plane. They just left.
Okay.
And they have slowly been coming back. So yeah, what you're saying really does play into that sort of thing where they're not gone. They're just on another plane.
Yeah.
And you just have to convince them to come back.
Ooh, I like
and
it.
So there may be an equal number of gem dragons or even more gem dragons than there are metallic and chromatic dragons. They're just not here.
I like it.
And the last interaction that lore has is that they sometimes choose to live near sapphire dragons.
Okay.
So emerald and sapphire dragons sometimes are neighbors.
Fair. I like it. That you're worth thinking out. Again, from a paranoid aspect too, and we'll talk about sapphire dragons, I can kind of see that interaction working a little bit just by the way the sapphires work.
Yeah,
the sapphires
because
are quirky themselves too.
They are, and they're also the next on the list.
Yes. Hey, look, good segue.
Yeah, I know, right? So sapphire dragons are the most warlike of the gem dragons, and their military might is directed towards primarily aberrations. All of the gem dragons hate aberrations, hate these evil psionic creatures that come from the far realms. Sapphire dragons are the ones that really don't like them.
Okay.
To the point where they lair up in the Underdark specifically so they can go hunt mind flayers and aboleths.
Ooh, I love it.
And, because they are also very territorial, they tend to run afoul of the drow and apparently the dwarves as well.
The Dwargar?
No, dwarves.
Oh, just plain dwarves, okay.
I'm guessing dwarves as a blanket category. So the Dwargar are probably included in that.
Okay.
But they aren't specified. It just says dwarves.
Gotcha.
So they end up butting heads with the drow and the dwarves as well. But apparently they get on really well with gnomes.
Of course they would.
They get on well with rock gnomes and Svirfneblin. So the rock gnomes and the deep gnomes
just creep me out.
I don't know what it is about sapphire dragons and lichen gnomes, but they do. So I guess that means that James is not allowed to like sapphire dragons.
Yeah, I was going to ask, between the two of us, which one is the sapphire, which one is the emerald?
Yeah, you are probably the emerald and I am probably the sapphire, if we had to be one or the other.
Yeah. So the neat thing about the sapphire dragons too that I absolutely love and I could honestly relate to is their horde is organized because again, much like the emerald dragon, they want to know the history, the provenance, like the lineage of all of their treasure. They do like these military like suits of armor that has been passed down through family lines and things like that. But it's organized in a way that makes sense only to them. And it's these random piles of chaos, but they know exactly where every little piece is by memory, kind of like the red dragons have
Yes.
their entire horde memorized. The sapphire dragons are the same, but also whatever weird coding or organization system that only makes sense to them. These totally have that ADD brain, which again, I totally get. I have piles of organized chaos. And if you move one of my piles, I lose everything because that thing is next to that thing, which is next to that thing. And if you move one of them, I don't know where anything is anymore because you moved my
all of your spatial
landmarks,
touchstones have gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I totally feel that with the Sapphire Dragon.
One of the neat things, primarily in later editions, this wasn't so much in second edition, but especially in fifth edition, with Sapphire Dragons is many of their extremities, so like their horns and the tips of their tails and some of the like the claws on their wings and such, are not attached to their bodies. They are just sort of floating around them, roughly in the spot where they're supposed to be, but held in place with their psionics.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so if you look at the picture in Fizban's, there's little bits of like the sort of whisker-like horns that are coming off the side of the face that are detached and floating around their head.
Oh, yeah. Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that's one of the little interesting quirks about Sapphire Dragons. But the reason why Sapphire Dragons and Emerald Dragons would make good neighbors is because Sapphire Dragons are also kind of in that sort of paranoid sort of state of mind, because they will straight up seal up the entrances of their lair with shapestone, and they will just close everything up to where you literally have to know where the lair is and be able to use magic or tunneling to dig in.
Yeah, I think as a party member, raiding a Sapphire Dragon's lair would be fun and frustrating because it very much would be like the labyrinth. You would have to like make, even if you made clues to like which way you came in, the stone's going to move around you as you pass through. And so finding your way back out might be harder than expected.
Yeah. And, I full on expect them to put up partitions throughout their lair to where you might be able to burrow into their lair, but you're only going to see about 5% of it because there's going to be like 3 chambers and it's all sealed off, and you don't know where within those 3 chambers and the connecting corridors to start digging again to get to the next section.
That was one thing Fizbins did mention, is because they can move those things if they are feeling defensive, they have to protect their lair. They will make those partitions, but they'll make it very, very thin so they can just bust through the wall, attack, retreat, and then seal it back up.
Go full on Kool-Aid Man.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. The other really neat physical trait about them is they have spider climb, so they can like crawl on the walls and just, so that's fun and terrifying. They have drop dragons.
Well, the reason why that is important is because their favorite food is giant spiders.
Okay.
And they have the ability to use their psionics to attract giant spiders to their lair.
Oh, damn it. No. Okay. Spider lair, I'm out.
And they will actively hunt giant spiders for food and sport within their lair.
Oh, I'm thinking, the fugu fish, where it's like it's poisonous and you have to have like the special stuff. The fugu spiders. Like it's totally a delicacy for them. You're like, ooh, fugu.
Yeah, and I think it was in 3rd edition, it mentioned that once they start getting older, a sapphire great worm can attract literally every giant spider within 6 miles to its lair.
Oh, sweet Jesus. I totally want to play this with a bunch of arachnophobes. It would be wrong to play this with a bunch of arachnophobes.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Just throw a bunch of gummy spiders on the map. Spiders everywhere.
So yeah, their breath weapon is, they retained the sonic breath weapon, so the thunder damage breath weapon. And in 5th edition, if you fail your saving throw, you become incapacitated.
Yeah.
So it just straight up knocks you out.
Night night. At that point, it's a question too. I mean, if the dragon hits the party with its breath weapon, then capacitates the party. It's the question of whether it's going to take the time to actually stomp on you all, or just seal you into a rock tomb.
I think it's going to do the latter. I think it's just going to close you up in a 20-foot square room.
Leave you a spider print and walk away.
No, I don't think it's even going to bother with that.
Oh, okay.
I think it's just going to seal you up in a 20 by 20 cube room and just leave you there for a couple decades to make sure that you've all suffocated.
There is no cask of Amontillado.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what they'll do.
Yeah, I like it.
I mean, you had the audacity to come into his home.
Yep.
He might stumble across your corpses in 40 years and is like, oh, I remember that.
Yeah, that is spiteful enough. I totally get with that. Yeah, that is absolutely correct.
That is absolutely what they would do. And then for their resistances, they're resistant to thunder damage and to lightning damage.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure where the lightning is coming from on this one, but they are. I'm thinking that they decided to do it as a thematic thing, thunder and lightning.
Yeah, I can see that too. And it's also the counterpart to the blues.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
I mean, all of your gem dragons are color toned. And so, sapphire dragon, blue dragon, lightning. It ties in.
And one other thing that I just noticed looking at the stat block in second edition is because of their psionics, their frightening presence affects creatures that are immune to fear.
I love that. That's kind of awesome.
Yeah, because one of the things with their breath weapon in second edition, if you saved on your saving throw against the breath weapon, you had to make a second save. And if you failed the second save, you fled in panic.
Yeah, fear effects were used a lot more in second and third than they are in fifth. It's kind of fun too. We talked about it our last episode, but I pulled up Time of the Twins on Audible. I'm going through, and they have a race called the Kinder, and they're basically halflings. And one of their racial traits is they have an immunity to fear, which means that like most people would be like, that place is evil, I'm not going. And they're just like, hey, look, I'm going to find trouble. And they just like walk right on in.
Yep. All right, we got one color of gem dragon left.
These are kind of fun.
Yeah, these are the topaz dragons. We thought that the white dragons were going to win the worst parent of the year award. And then we got to the topaz dragons because they just straight up abandoned their children. Like, if a group of adventurers were to come into a topaz dragon's lair and they had a whole clutch of hatchlings that just hatched out, they would nope out and leave the children behind.
Yeah. These guys are, I don't know, like temperament-wise, they're weird. And again, I almost get them. So one of the things I read with the topaz that I really enjoy, they like living by the coast because they like the water, but they don't like being wet. They just want to be able to see the water. And if it gets too misty, they'll get irritable because it's too wet. They want to be near the water. They want to be near the thing, but not actually bothered by it. And there are days where I can understand.
Yeah. The adjectives in the article that I read that they use to describe the topaz dragons are erratic, selfish, and unfriendly.
Yeah, I have my days. I definitely have my days.
Yeah.
The other thing that I read with the topaz dragons that just I love, for some reason, nobody knows why, there's no basis, there's no lore, they just say, for whatever reason, topaz dragons abhor. Like, hate is not a strong enough word. They absolutely abhor brass dragons.
Bronze dragons.
Bronze dragons, yes, okay. And
it's because they prefer the same terrain.
Okay.
It's because they are rivals for layering locations.
Okay. I mean, I could see that because they do fall in the same terrain. And it even goes to the point where they talk about, like, the preferred treasures for the topaz dragons are those yellow metals, golds, copper alloys, things like that. But bronze, absolutely no. And if they see bronze, they get angered. Like, it's just, bam, it's on. Like, that's bronze, not gold. You're going to die.
And, that's kind of strange because you're talking about how they like to see the water but not be wet.
Yes.
Their preferred elemental plane is the plane of water.
That's weird. That is very strange.
Yeah. So that's why I'm curious about that, because
maybe it ties into that whole erratic thing.
Potentially. According to second edition, they like water little and swim only to hunt or attack.
Gotcha. So I'm trying to find the quote in Fizbin's. The first quote from Fizbin himself was, A topaz dragon named Blustertail once complained to me that he hated water because it talked too much. Whatever that means.
Yeah.
They're weird.
The erratic.
Yes, absolutely.
Erratic to the max. These are the tweakers
Absolutely,
of
yes.
the gem dragons. But their preferred diet consists of large aquatic creatures, so specifically sharks and squid.
I can see that, and I get that too, because sharks, I mean, if you're kind of that just like weirdly irritable, erratic, and then there's that thing that's chompy or mouthy, or, a great kraken that's going to eat, then yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I'm better than you, chomp, and it's just kind of a power flex at that point.
So getting into their breath weapons, they have, I think, the coolest one of the gem dragons.
Okay.
They have a dehydration breath weapon.
Yes, they're making jerky.
So in 5th edition, it is listed as necrotic damage.
I love a necrotic breath weapon. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's literally it's almost like a salt spray.
Nice.
That's how I'm picturing it. I
just got a terrible mental image that feeling of that like salty crust that all building up on you. Ew.
Yeah.
I just textured myself.
Yeah. I mean, in Fizbins, they call it desiccating breath.
Nice,
so
yeah.
It is literally just drawing the moisture out of whatever target is coming up against.
This is the end of Last Crusade.
Yeah. And in 5th edition, they have disadvantage on strength-based ability checks and saving throws, and strength-based weapon damage only deals half damage.
Yeah.
In older editions, it straight up did strength damage.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of glad it's gone. I kind of miss it at the same time, but stat penalties were brutal.
Yeah, because if your strength ever hit 0, you just straight up died.
Yep, you're done. GG. Roll new character.
And in 2nd edition, if you fail the saving throw, you lose 1d6 plus 6 strength points.
Holy crap.
And if you succeeded, you only lost 1d6 strength points. And the only way to restore it was through the heal or regeneration spell, which I think were like 7th level spells.
Oh, damn.
Or slowly at 1 point of strength per day.
Okay. Assuming you can shamble your way, have enough strength to walk out of the lane when it's done. And this dragon will kill you out of spite.
Yeah, I just figured it out. Topaz Dragons, Sheogorath.
Yeah.
Sheogorath from the Elder Scrolls.
Yes.
That's the mentality that a Topaz Dragon has.
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, I think we have prattled on for long enough.
This wraps up. I think, again, I am sad that the gem dragons get underrepresented. Personally, I think they are more interesting than the chromatic or even the metallics. I love the ability effects with the weapons. I love that they're all kind of erratic and just a little off in their own weird way, which makes them so much more fun as an NPC or just this giant big bad. I mean, whether it's spiteful or whether it's just bothered that you showed up in its area or that it wants to show off all its shiny things, so come check this out. These are much more fun to play, I think.
I think these are less plot point dragons, and these are more MacGuffin dragons.
Probably, yeah.
So these are not going to be major players in your story, but these are absolutely going to be checkpoint bosses that you have to interact with in order to get the thing to advance.
Absolutely, yes.
That is the role that I picture these gem dragons in.
No, I think that is the perfect takeaway on these.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next time we are going to be having an interview. We are going to be having C.R. Rowanson Clark come back on because he has co-written a trilogy of lit RPG books, and they have just gone on pre-order, and he is starting his Hype Train promo tour for his lit RPG books. So we are going to be talking with him, and we're going to be bringing that to you all here in 2 weeks.
Excellent.
So if you have any comments, suggestions, or ideas, or if you have any questions that you would like to ask Clark about his book, send us an email, undercommontaste@gmail.com, or come over and join us on our Discord. You can find a link to the Discord along with all of our other social media links through our website, undercommontaste.com. You can also find links there to our Patreon, patreon.com/undercommontaste, and our itch store, undercommontaste.itch.io.
this is your first time with us, we're so happy you found us. We hope you enjoyed talking about the Gem Dragons. You can find our other dragon topics or all of our other episodes on your podcatcher of choice. Just search Under Common Taste. As always, give us a rating and review. This helps increase our visibility and lets us know what kind of content you want to hear more of.
Stay safe, everyone, and we will see you again in 2 weeks.
Happy gaming.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Under Common Taste. Our theme song is Massacre Anne, written and performed by Mary Kroll and used with permission. You can find Mary online at marykroll.bandcamp.com or on Patreon at patreon.com/Dr. Mary C. Kroll. Our logo is by David Sutherland. You can find more of David's work on deviantart.com/David Sutherland or on instagram.com/Willex_73. We'll be back in 2 weeks, so stay safe, and we'll see you then.